Alrighty, hello everyone. I haven't recorded a one-on-one video in a while, so it's nice to be back. Today I wanted to record something nice and short, just talking about the process of releasing your symptoms, right? So I get the question, I was recently working with somebody in a one-on-one session, and they were asking me about the releasing process. And I realized that there was way too much of an active, efforted approach to releasing symptoms. So it made me want to come on here and give my take on what is the simplest way to help you to release your symptoms. And also, when I'm talking about releasing your symptoms, for me, the key is getting to the root kind of cause, and that's emotional repression or just the resistance to physical symptoms in the nervous system, right? So when I'm talking about emotional repression, the key part of it is the physical component that we're afraid to feel. We're also reacting to the thoughts as well. But basically, it's the resistance, the fact that we're resisting something in our experience, and it's generally got a emotional component, and kind of what makes up an emotion is just the raw physical feeling and then the thought process, so it can be anything from frustration to anger to sadness to irritation. You get the gist of it, right? So that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying release, right? What I say for releasing a symptom, releasing a physical sensation, releasing an emotion, releasing a thought pattern, it's all the same process, okay? And what's the simplest way to do this? Well, what generally happens is the mind wants to do things actively. It wants to get caught up in activity. It wants to, make things happen. But you can use that a little bit to your advantage to kind of go and sit, right? So say, okay, I'm going to set aside some time and I'm going to go and sit and I'm going to go into my experience, right? That can be the active doing bit, right, is going and sitting and inquiring into your experience. But the other side of it is surrender. And this is powerful because it's generally the reason that there's so much doing in our minds is to get away from the fear of what we'll feel if we surrender our control over our experience, right? So this is what I do when I meditate, is I just stop. I just let go. I remain aware of if I'm getting caught up in thoughts, but I just stop. I set 20 minutes and I say, can I surrender? Nowadays it comes quite naturally to me, but I had to do a lot of work around this for a long time, a lot of discomfort, a lot of resistance kind of had to be sat through. Now it happens quite naturally, but for those of you that are still working with your symptoms, I would say sit, surrender, set a timer and say, for the next 20 minutes, what would it feel like if I totally let go and let experience take control? That's one approach, right? The other approach is to notice what it is in your body that feels uncomfortable and to go directly there. I would kind of mix these two approaches, right? I would sit and I would surrender to what am I feeling? And then I would always ask myself the question, what am I resisting? What feels like the problem in my experience? What feels like the thing that I most want to get away from? And it can be anything, right? Often for me, it'd be like a feeling in the gut, a feeling in the chest, a feeling in the head, anything that feels like, right? Anything that feels like a symptom you want to release, go into that. The actual releasing component, there's no like magical releasing button, right? So that's the funny thing. To go back to where this video started, the thing about releasing is to go into it and to kind of surrender into the sensation. That's what I would say to do, right? And everything that you're sitting with is powerful, right? You're doing important work by just being with it, right? If you're sitting in frustration, but you have the intention to remain aware of what you're experiencing, right? That's the difference between, often there's a fear of getting caught up in the emotion. So like if it's frustration, if it's fear, if it's confusion, if it's resistance, if it's actual resistance. There's nothing wrong with actual resistance. It's the identification with resistance. It's identification with the frustration. It's identification with the anger. Now, there's nothing wrong with any of those experiences. It's when that experience becomes us in the moment and you're not seeing it, right? So, in the letting go, in the surrendering, the nuance is you're cultivating awareness. You're training your awareness. That's the power of meditation, right? That's the difference, like looking at myself, that's the difference of me 3 years ago versus me having done meditation for 3 years and inquiry and surrendering and shadow work and all of this kind of shit, is there's an awareness of whatever arises. And it goes deeper than that. Like my sense of self has eroded, and it's weird. It gets weird, but that's not what we're going into here. But yeah, it gets. There's more to it. But the key thing is that kind of that access to an awareness of what you're experiencing and an ability to hold space increases and increases and increases. So that's the orientation that I would give to someone is don't worry about making the release happen, right? Don't worry about, this was the point that came to mind when I was talking with somebody recently. It was this person had a very active approach to trying to release. And I don't know, maybe there are approaches like that. But that's not, that's not the approach that I'm sharing here. You can mix and match. But if it feels like you're struggling with, you can't actively release your symptoms, then my approach is to surrender into it, to allow it, to go into it. But the question, I can't reiterate how powerful this question can be. The question of what am I afraid of feeling is so powerful, and don't believe the thoughts, right? Just now, I was going deep and deep into some stuff that was coming up, and some like shadowy work stuff, and there was fear of what, there was fear. And then the difference is if you believe that fear, it's going to say, don't feel into that. It's too much, blah, 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 blah. And then I was just like, what if I just go into the depths of it? And when you really surrender into it, there's no problem, right? So any thought saying, don't feel into so much, you're gonna die, you're gonna get stuck. You get stuck by holding that experience at a distance. You don't get stuck by dying into the depths of the experience. Right. So, I've tested, I've tested this time and time again with myself, right? As I've gone deep with the kind of shadow work side of the meditation path, like even after having recovered, some like deep stuff would come up, just deep emotions, deep fears, deep triggers, deep kind of, heavy stuff. And every time that would build up, and over time I would eventually just sit and go deeper and deeper and deeper and just completely allow myself to experience the depths of that. And the mind would say, you're going to go crazy if you're going to go any deeper into this. And I'd be like, okay, let's do it. There's a fear of going crazy there, right? It's like you're going to lose your mind in depression if you go this deep into this resistance, right? This feeling of that kind of feeling. And I would go into it and it would be like, there was a fear. That's what's coming up, right? The fear of going insane. That's what's coming up. The fear of getting stuck in fear. That's what's coming up. But to actually allow it completely allow it, to say, bring it on, right? And you don't have to do it from a harsh forcing approach. It can just be like a total surrender, total acceptance, a total allowance. And don't worry if that sounds like too much for you where you're at, right? If it sounds like total surrender, total allowance, how the fuck do I do that? Start with where you're at, right? Life is always giving you what you're ready for, right? So don't listen to the mind that says you're not ready for this. Go and meet your experience where it's at. Meet your experience where it's at. That's the fucking key, right? Whatever is coming forward, meet it. Go and meet it. Keep it simple. Meet your experience where it's at. Sit with it. But to actively meet it is to be aware and willing to go into it. Whereas to resist it actively is to tell yourself stories about a problem. To say, fuck this, fuck that, I'm stuck, I'm, whatever. I'm at this, I'm at that. That's to actively resist it. So to actively meet it is to meet the resistance. Say, hey, there's resistance. Come on in. Welcome. How you doing? Let's get to know each other. Experientially, you don't have to actually have a conversation with resistance. You don't have to understand the emotion. This is another point. I had a question recently, somebody asking about, I'm struggling to make the link between the physical sensation and the emotion. You don't have to do that. You can. I've heard of people talk about a technique like that, but that's not the technique that I've used. What I've done is to go into it, keep it fucking simple. What don't you want to feel? It's so simple. There's just something in your experience that you don't want to feel. Go into it. And it might not all release at once. But the more willing you are, the longer you'll sit. And the more you'll let go and the more will release. So don't let the fact that, this is another point I want to make, is people often make the point that I have symptoms all the time. So I need to get to a stable baseline first before I can deal with the symptoms that come up. That's bullshit, man. I was the same. I'm sorry, but that's bullshit, because that's it. Meet your experience, right? If there's symptoms coming up all the time, go and meet them. That's an excuse. If there's symptoms all the time, then sit with it, right? Cultivate a space for you to work through what's there all the time. If there's something there all the time, then cool, you have the place to begin. What's this resistance that I carry with me all the time? What are these symptoms that I carry with me all the time? It requires a deep acceptance. It requires a deep surrender, right? I've surrendered many times where I was like, if I don't go on with life in any other way except to sit and feel this, then I accept that, right? So it requires a deep surrender, but it's worth it, is what I can say. I mean, the reason I say it's worth it, because for me, it came to where there was no other choice. It's like, either I'm fucking miserable or I surrender to the depths of this experience. So it doesn't matter what you're experiencing. You can experiencing symptoms all the time. Use that, right? I understand it's difficult. I'm not saying it's not difficult, but I'm just saying that you can come up with any excuse that you want. And I'm trying to encourage you to flip the switches, right? There's always a way. There's always an opportunity there. And the opportunity is meet your experience. Your experience is the healing path. The healing path isn't in some crazy course that some chronic fatigue coach has made. I'm not saying that you can't learn good techniques from other people. For sure you can. It was helpful for me to do courses. But the cool thing is the healing path is experience arising as it is. The physicality of your experience as it is, the resistance arising in your experience as it is. Meet it. Open. Invite, allow, surrender. Okay, good luck. You got this. If you need one-on-one coaching, I have launched a website recently. I'll put the link below where I'll dive into this kind of stuff with you. And yeah, if you have any specific questions, let me know in the comments. I may or may not make a video depending on if I feel like it's a question that is like worth making a whole video about, but feel free to drop any questions. And yeah, good luck. Bye.